Who doesn't love the concept of super soldiers in science fiction? Everyday men and women being turned into something harder, better, faster, and stronger is always an eye-catching trope for a series. The Emperor of Mankind thought so as well, and he made it his goal to create a line of super soldiers that would help him conquer the galaxy. When he managed to reclaim Terra from the savage kingdoms of techno-barbarians, he enacted the Great Crusade to reunite the lost worlds of humanity that suffered from the results of the Dark Age of technology. To do this, the Emperor needed troops that could surpass their baseline humanity and become super soldiers. But not just super soldiers. They must be symbols of his might, presence, and leadership. Using science to transcend their mortality and become something more. It's just that, with all things involving science, it took a lot of trial and error to figure out the best way to produce these soldiers. One iteration was too perfect, others were necessary for the time being, some were interesting experiments, but every step to creating the best soldier allowed for more information to be gained for the benefit of the Imperium as a whole. In this video, let's look at a more abstract subject as we go over the different advancements in Space Marine concepts. See how the concept of super soldiers was worked on to create the modern-day Adeptus Astartes. Be prepared to be amazed, learn something, and question how many extra organs can fit into a human body.
No more grief! We go forward to do our part in the galaxy!
Custodians. The first super soldiers created under the Emperor of Mankind before the unification wars of Terra. Given up by the nobles of Terra as mere infants, they are given the ultimate honor of possibly becoming bodyguards for the Master of Mankind himself. A Custodian is gene-crafted down to the last detail to be the perfect soldier. They are taller, stronger, faster, and purer in soul than regular Astartes, given the advanced science used to create them. This secret art of body reconstruction has been referred to by the fantastical term of gene alchemy, almost as if the science behind it is so advanced that it can be similar to magic. The knowledge of creating a Custodian is known only to a few trusted and closely monitored chirurgeons. It is unknown if Custodians have anything similar to a Space Marine's gene seed, but they do not share their other organ implants. Custodians don't need a second heart, or a third lung, or the ability to spit acid. Also, they aren't restricted to just male recruits, as the process to create one is so superior to the Astartes method that even female Custodians exist. Their bodies are built to be carefully crafted by their creators piece by piece through gene sculpting so that they can be bodily and spiritually perfect. Not only do they live longer than Space Marines, but they are also much less corruptible due to their souls also being strengthened. So, if these warriors are so much better than Space Marines, why aren't they used more often and just take over the roles of the Astartes originally? Because they are incredibly difficult to create and, as such, they can't be mass-produced. Also, they were never envisioned by the Emperor to be the conquering force that would claim the galaxy. Instead, they were his companions and protectors, who focused on their own individual merits, rather than be trained to work as groups. Custodians are created to not let emotions get the better of them, to the point where others ask if they still have any of their original humanity. These golden warriors are the perfect soldiers, but they can't be the perfect weapon the Imperium needs for its goals.
Make way for the Emperor, peasants, or get crushed underneath my boots.
Thunder Warriors. An early concept for what the Emperor had in mind for a full army of super soldiers. They were the key fighting force during the Unification Wars and were instrumental in allowing the Emperor to conquer Terra and overthrow the techno-barbarian kingdoms. Compared to modern-day Space Marines, Thunder Warriors were larger and stronger, while also being capable of high levels of psychic resistance. Such features were necessary for fighting against the warp horrors that were unleashed during the Age of Strife. These soldiers had more of their humanity intact in terms of their emotions compared to the Custodians. However, they were rushed into production using science that was not as thoroughly tested at the time. This created overly violent troops that were prone to fits of bloodlust and had unstable bodies that would have them degrade and die suddenly while in service. It also appears that the creation process wouldn't allow females to survive the ordeal of genetic enhancement. Such issues didn't matter much to the Emperor, as he saw them as only useful in conquering Terra and not the galaxy at large. Interestingly, the Thunder Warriors were the beginning of the Emperor creating the 20 legions that would go on to become the 20 legiones Astartes in the future. Thunder Warriors would be organized into 20 legions with their own specializations of warfare, and would be led by 20 Primarchs, the best warriors of the respective legions, who were appointed by the Emperor. These mass-produced soldiers were given antiquated equipment that would eventually become the standard arsenal for Space Marines after several revisions. Now, the Emperor could have just let the Thunder Warriors die from their failing gene templates after he united the planet under his banner, but he was in a bit of a time crunch. So, he came up with a quick solution. They were promptly and violently disposed of near the end of the Unification Wars, with only a few survivors having either trying to seek revenge against their former master or hiding away while trying to find a cure for their short lifespans. These survivors didn't live long. The Thunder Warriors would eventually become the inspiration for the Emperor to create a more stable and less insane type of super soldier.
The first of many brothers.
Prototype legionnaires. The prototypes to the Space Marines that were created during the Unification Wars in secret. Collectively known as the Primordial Strain, these Proto-Marines were created using the earliest created samples of gene seed that took centuries of scientific research and genetic engineering to make. The results were irregular at times, with some legionnaires being more unstable than others. However, the Emperor kept studying what he was working with, and he managed to create functioning super soldiers from more stable gene seed. A vast majority of these prototypes were created using the gene seed of what would eventually become Primarch Lionel Johnson's due to how consistently stable it was. Prototype legionnaires were a step for the Emperor to figure out how best to create stabilized gene templates that would allow for better functioning and balanced troops. Additional organs would be implanted within the body, and the process would be set for candidates to be male children, as the science only allowed for these certain individuals to undergo the process and be capable of surviving. Of course, they would be phased out when the end product was finalized. Speaking of which,
His final draft, with absolutely no faults or errors.
Space Marines. The end result of the Space Marine project that the Emperor implemented in secret beneath the Himalayas in his labs. These are the gene-stable and non-degrading super soldiers that the Emperor set out to create. And it only took around 150 years to perfect. The Emperor settled on 19 additional organs that would be added to the soldier, and that recruitment would be best set during a boy's preteen years. During the time of their creation, these Astartes would be raised exclusively from the young of Terra. Recruits would eventually be taken from more varied locations as the Imperium expanded and reclaimed lost worlds during the Great Crusade. These are the mass-produced soldiers that the Emperor saw as being necessary to conquer the galaxy. They lacked the bloodlust and the hunger for war of the Thunder Warriors, and the superiority of the Custodians, but this was by design. The Space Marines were organized into 20 legions, each with their own specialties. The gene seeds affiliated with each legion can be attributed to making the Marine more specialized in things like siege defense, engineering, piloting, strategizing, etc. They were also given upgraded armor and weapons courtesy of the recently allied Mars and its tech priests. The Emperor believed that the Space Marines would eventually lead to the unification of the galaxy, and that they should have a purpose other than war. He wanted them to be guardians, statesmen, envoys, etc. He believed that they should serve others and not rule over them. He let them keep their humanity. However, This would be a weakness that would be exploited by darker forces later on. Numbering in the hundreds of thousands, they were at the Emperor's side during the Great Crusade as they conquered solar systems, wiped out alien threats, and reclaimed lost worlds for the Greater Imperium. There was also another reason that the Emperor enacted this crusade. It was to find certain individuals that would make the legions whole once found.
I may be older now, but I can still equip myself. Thank you.
Primarchs. The sons of the Emperor that were created to lead his legions in conquering the galaxy and uniting it all under the banner of mankind. These 20 demigods were born as a result of his Primarch project, which he had initiated sometime in M29. He would be near completing it in 792 M30, sometime after the Treaty of Olympus Mons. Now that the Emperor had the help of Mars's tech priests and Luna's gene scientists, he would finish developing the finest leaders that would make sure the galaxy stayed in human hands after the Great Crusade was finished. The Primarchs are seen to be pure sources of gene seed that would make sure the legions would never degrade should the situation arise. They were also created using the genetic material of the Emperor and his perpetual partner at the time, a woman named Erda. There was also a little warp energy and magic thrown in for good measure. Eventually, through chaos corruption and a little bit of time travel, the gestating Primarchs were launched from the secret lab that housed them into the galaxy. There, they were scattered to different planets, and nature versus nurture took its course. Due to this galactic scattering, the Primarchs each grew up and exhibited different characteristics. Some gained strange mutations, while others gained psychic powers. Every Primarch is capable of reaching maturity quickly, and they all grow to larger than average stature due to their immortus glands that they have in their brains. They are still capable of growing older, although they can live naturally past 10,000 years. Primarchs also share similar organs as Space Marines, such as a second heart. They are naturally stronger than other Astartes, and their presence demands respect from those under them. All 20 Primarchs were eventually found by the Emperor and introduced to their respective legions as their leaders. It is unknown if the Primarchs would have led more like the Emperor had they not been scattered, but one could assume this to be the case. The 20 are second in power only to their father, and they either respect or detest him for this. Despite their origin as the sons of the Emperor, these demigods were still very susceptible to being corrupted by the forces of chaos. Their souls were not infallible. It seems the Emperor wasn't capable, or maybe refused, of giving them pure souls. Should a Primarch be killed, their respective legion will suffer immensely as they no longer have a renewable source of pure gene seed.
The greatest weapon against the greatest enemy. We are here to kill chaos.
Grey Knights. The Emperor's final gift to humanity before his entombment onto the Golden Throne. With gene seed said to be taken directly from the Emperor, these are Space Marines meant to fight against demons and the other forces of chaos. They are all psychers of the highest quality, for they must be called upon to defend against things like demon incursions that threaten to overrun entire planets. They are masters of melee and ranged combat, and they are given the necessary equipment for both. Storm bolters, equipped to their armor's wrists, allow them to shoot while also wielding psychically attuned force weapons that allow them to channel their mental energies into warp-shattering strikes. Even their armor is laced with psychoconductive filaments and inscribed with wards so that they can be better protected from warp taint and unleash their psychic powers with reduced backlash. The creation of the Grey Knights started because the Emperor foresaw that the Horus Heresy would end with him suffering too much of a personal cost, and that he would no longer be able to venture out into the galaxy to fight against chaos. This Space Marine is an advancement on the concept of an all-psyker Space Marine chapter. They don't appear to have any current issue with their gene seed, and they don't suffer from spontaneous mutations like the Thousand Sons. It is speculated that the Grey Knights were supposed to be the new Space Marines led by Magnus, should the Primarch dispose of his corruptible legion. But Magnus refused, and instead a loyalist Thousand Sons sergeant was given the role of Supreme Grand Master, the lead Grey Knight. The Grey Knights continue fighting against the monsters of the warp to this day, and they do it knowing that they are the last weapon the Emperor bestowed onto the Imperium.
I'm an abomination, you say? Still, I'm the Imperium's abomination.
Cursed Founding Marines. Whenever new chapters of Space Marines are created, they are acknowledged collectively as a founding. Records of each founding are cataloged extensively by the Adeptus Terra, except for the 13th founding, or the Dark Founding, where certain chapters had odd recruitment methods that needed covering up. The Space Marines of the 21st founding would be so unfortunate that the event would be referred to as the Cursed Founding. Space Marine chapters are supposed to be repopulated by a supply of gene seed that is supposed to be heavily monitored so that it is genetically consistent and lacking mutations. But, in an attempt to work out some of the more major flaws with the gene seed of the more problematic chapters, a group of Magos Biologus tech priests, under the sponsorship of a branch of the Inquisition, made some slight adjustments. These adjustments created several chapters of Astartes that developed bizarre behaviors and physical mutations. The Black Dragons chapter had hyperactive osmodula organs, which created bony protrusions from their bodies. The Minotaurs were difficult to command berserkers, but they got better. The Sons of Antaeus were incredibly resilient due to their stronger-than-average skeletal structure. The Blood Gorgons became traitors. The Firehawks and Flame Falcons got set on fire, but only one of those two became cooler from it. And the Lamenters died just by being alive. Maybe it was for these results that the gene seeds were no longer tinkered with in the near future. But the desire for change was made evident by some members of the Inquisition and the Mechanicus. However, they didn't know that change had already been put into motion.
The Primarchs have father issues. I can relate.
Alpha Primus. The precursor creation of Archmagos Belisarius Cawl, who became a prototype for the Primaris Marines. Made with gene seed from multiple legions, Alpha Primus was supposed to be on the same level of strength and ability as a Primarch. Unfortunately, his body and genetic stability can barely contain his current state of being, and he is racked with constant physical pain. He was created when Cawl tried to copy the Emperor's Primarch project so that superior versions of Space Marines could be made. Instead, Cawl made a Space Marine whose biology was rewritten at the genetic level and didn't require organ implants. Alpha Primus has lived for thousands of years as Call's personal enforcer, and he is most likely the strongest Space Marine currently alive. He is an incredibly powerful psyker and is larger than any other Astartes. However, his exact origins and method of creation are not entirely clear. The traitor Marine Fabius Bile once alluded to warp sorcery being used to create him, a similarity that was brought up with the original Primarch project. Alpha Primus's unique gene seed structure makes him highly sought after by the forces of Chaos, because they see him as the key to evolving their current legions of Chaos Marines. What awaits him as the Great Rift continues to plague the galaxy? We can only wait and see.
10,000 years can give you such a crick in the neck!
Primaris Space Marines. After the Horus Heresy, the Primarch Robute Guilliman tasked Cawl with the development of a stronger and more stable breed of Space Marines. This would be one of Call's projects for the next 10,000 years, which he was able to accomplish due to the access of pure gene seed samples from all 20 of the Primarchs contained in a device called the Sang Primus Portum, which Guilliman gave to Cawl. Unwilling recruits from across the Imperium would be secretly captured by Call's forces and be brought to his labs for experimentation. The successes were then placed into cryosleep, awaiting the time when they would be needed. During their sleep, they would be subjected to training regiments that would be metaphorically drilled into their heads repeatedly. The resulting successful recruits would awaken millennia into the future, fully prepared for what they were created to do. Primaris Marines are larger, faster, stronger, and more intelligent than their firstborn cousins. They are given 3 new organs, bringing the total amount of additional organs to 22. Sinew coils are cables that reinforce the Marine's tendons and ligaments, which allow for explosions of physical strength. The Magnificat, also known as the Amplifier, is placed into the Marine's brain in order to secrete hormones that increase the body's size. This organ is actually 1/2 of a Primarch's immortus gland, so its original effect is reduced. Finally, there is the Belisarian Furnace. Also known as the Revitalizer, this organ connects a Primaris Marine's 2 hearts and releases chemicals when the body is subjected to extreme physical trauma, granting it incredible regeneration. Together with these new organs, the gene seed of a Primaris Marine is also incredibly resilient to generational degradation. It measures only 0.001% genetic deviance for every generation. This was a tremendous gift for chapters that had these issues, such as the Blood Angels and the Space Wolves. These advancements, however, would not be met with unanimous acceptance by every chapter due to how some viewed them as untraditional. Some chapters even killed their Primaris reinforcements for fear that they were getting replaced. Eventually, as Guilliman continued to apply the use of Primaris Space Marines, the holdout chapters started to recognize their performance. The process of creating a Primaris Marine doesn't just stop with new aspirants. Even firstborn Marines can become Primaris by undergoing the Rubicon Primaris, the extensive and forceful surgery necessary to receive the upgraded benefits. Crossing the Rubicon is incredibly risky, as the odds of surviving it are in the minority. However, further research from Call has increased the likelihood of success significantly. These are the current model of Space Marines, and they are necessary for the ongoing Indomitus Crusade to have a hope of victory. It was a bit of an unusual thing to talk about for this series, but I believe looking at how the Imperium got to where it is in terms of Space Marines is a pretty interesting thing to observe. What else can be done with Marines now that humanity is playing with the idea of advancing its technological capabilities? What will happen to them when more loyalist Primarchs return? Are the 2 banished Primarchs a secret ingredient to making the Primaris work? We'll just have to wait and find out. Thank you all so much for watching. If you'd like to stay up to date and watch along as these videos come out, then please subscribe and stick around. In my next video, I'd like to talk about 40k's newest faction and its rocky and stony foundations. Until then,